Good afternoon. My name is Jim Conlan, and welcome to the latest of our Cult Classics documentary, where we look back on TV series throughout the decades, the 2000s, the 90s, the 80s, the 70s, that have left their mark on the entertainment industry and are renowned as what a cult classic, which have a niche audience that are popular throughout this to this current day, and they can be watched by any audience, no matter the decade, no matter the generation, and still resonates to this time. Our cult classic documentary in terms of this edition's TV series is the one and only Spin City. 6 seasons from 1996 to 2002. It was the pioneer of comedy meets politics back in the early 90s, and obviously it bared way for such series as we know today, like The Office. The Spin City was the inspiration for that. It had legendary actors such as Michael J. Fox, Charlie Sheen, my guest this evening, the one and only Richard Kind, who played the character Paul Lassiter, who was an ambassador from the show there for all 6 seasons, for all 145 episodes from 1996 to 2002. He was part of the furniture of Spin City. Paul, the character, Richard, the actor. Richard, you can't do a Spin City and talk about Spin City without talking about Paul Lassiter. And for you, was it one of those sort of blessed sort of TV shows and TV series? And it's probably been a big part of your career as such, sort of Spin City, when people look back on terms of TV series and the character Paul Lassiter. It still lives on very much to this day.
Well, I'm glad you say that. I don't necessarily agree with you, but I'm happy to hear you say that. As far as when I auditioned for this, there used to be a thing called pilot season in Hollywood. And this was the hot show because Michael J. Fox was coming back to TV and Gary David Goldberg was coming back. And they already had a commitment for 13 on the air. So you knew that the show, you were employed for 13 weeks, which for any actor is great. If you knew that you were being employed for 6 years, that would have been even better. But we knew we were going right on the air. So this was a very desirable project to get. So I really wanted it. Number two, it was a really, really great script. The pilot episode was superior. And I think a lot of the scripts from the first 2 years were absolutely, they were just superior. I don't know how much you know about TV, but there used to be a show, or a guy who used to run shows called Nat Hiken, Hiken. And he did Sergeant Bilko and Car 54, Where Are You? And those were true farces. And I am not a lover of farce, but these were intricate farces that weird things were happening and came to fruition at the end. Much more so than your typical sitcom. These were weird things happening that, you know, and some guy was at the center, especially with Bilko, where they fixed everything through wrangling and moving things about, and you had to go here and you had to go there and pretend to be this and take a cab over here. And Michael Fox was, in essence, Bilko, and would try and solve the problems for the mayor. I don't think that was necessarily what Gary David Goldberg was good at. However, Bill Lawrence, who co-created the show with Gary, and in my eyes was the brainchild behind Spin City, while Gary was the leader, was the emotional leader. Like Sergeant Bilko never had heart.
Yep.
Spin City had heart. It had real, not maudlin or sentimental, but it had heart. You could hook onto the characters, and they weren't as cartoonish as maybe Nat Hiken used to write. In any case, the two of them worked so well together. And Bill Lawrence later on, I mean, you say that the that The Office was, Office. I believe that Scrubs was really the next level for Bill, because Spin City used to have three distinct stories going on at any one time. You had a decent sized cast. You had what was happening with Mike, what was happening with some of the lesser characters, and then usually the third story, which was mine so often, and was always delegated to maybe 2.5 to 3 pages of the script. But they told a story in these shortened amount of times. And that's what Scrubs does. Scrubs tells different stories just like that. And they were told with fast, fast cutting and fast scenes. The initial scene of the show was Mike having a meeting of all the people in the show in his office. We used to go in there and do that. And from there, we splintered off with, maybe we had personal problems, maybe addressing those problems, but they were always three parallel stories. They rarely intersected. And if you look at some of the sitcoms of the 70s and the 80s, there were maybe two stories going on. One was what was going on in the workplace and what was going on personally, especially in like the Bob Newhart show or in the Mary Tyler Moore show. What happened in the office, what was happening personally. These were, in Spin City, you had three different shows. And in order to get all those scenes and all those stories, it was lightning fast. You never had a scene that was longer than 2.5, 3 pages, ever. And it moved and it moved and it moved. And Gary used to pride himself on taking 35 minutes and paring it down to 24 minutes or 26 minutes. He was so proud of his editing. And I think a lot of that led to the new type of comedy, like 30 Rock, like Scrubs, like The Office, that were small, quick scenes, quick cutting. And I thought that was a great thing. I thought that's why Spin City was really innovative.
And I suppose, Richard, I spoke to Alexander Chaplin, and he told me one of the things that was quite, I say, nerve-wracking for him, first off, was working with, obviously, Michael J. Fox was executive producer on the show as well. So Michael was involved in everything, sort of, and he found that maybe a bit intimidating at first. But for an experienced actor like you, working with a cast with Michael and Michael being part of the boss, it probably made no sorts of difference, I imagine.
I disagree with Sandy in this and in everything. I love Sandy. He's a dear friend who drives me nuts, and I adore him. And he's so smart and so talented and so kind. He's just a great guy. No, I can't say that Michael was intimidating. I don't think he ever tried to be intimidating. I think maybe Sandy imposed that on himself. I will tell you what was intimidating is usually if you're playing tennis with a better tennis player, you play better.
Yeah.
You rise up to that other tennis player. We had, as Michael will attest to, the best that acting can offer. Not only that, they were not, Sandy was new, but Alan Ruck had been around for 25, 30 years already. I knew him as an actor in Chicago. He had done movies. Barry was an icon, certainly a Broadway icon, and a few movies iconic. Michael Boatman, not new, but not old. But he had worked on stage. He had done a series or two. We were all veterans, not extensive veterans, but we were all veterans of our craft. We had all been on stage, knew about camera work. So we had been around the block a few times. So there's that. at the time, we were really, really grateful that we had a job on a show with class, with such good writing and smart writing. That doesn't come along anymore. Or I shouldn't say that. That's wrong. It is around. That doesn't come along that often. And when you have it, you grab it, you embrace it. It was so good that when some of the scripts were not as good, maybe the third, fourth, fifth year, when they started faltering a little bit, you recognized it when they weren't true. And Gary, Bill Lawrence once said something. I mean, he's a bit of a genius, Bill, as Ted Lasso now will attest to. I mean, he's not a one trick pony, because Ted Lasso is very different than Scrubs or Spin City.
Yeah.
But Bill said this one time to me. He goes, "You don't like the line? Don't worry. We got 3 others that are just as funny." Gary did not take that approach. He said, get to what the characters are, get to what makes them tick, why they act the way they do, and the comedy will come from that. So here you are with 2 geniuses, and really masters of their trade. Gary David Goldberg, who knew story and knew characters and didn't want to, he always wanted to tell the truth through the characters, with Bill Lawrence, who said, "You don't like it? Go ahead, we got another joke." So, my God, what a pleasure to work with those people. That Michael was a producer didn't even occur to me. Yeah. I always wanted to please Michael because I admired him. It was his show, not as a producer. It was his show. If you wanted to, if you didn't want to call it Spin City, you call it the Michael J. Fox Show. And the shows were always about him. He always had the A storyline for obvious reasons. So I wanted to please him, but I wanted to please Gary and Bill as well. You always wanted, you always wanted to please Gary. Gary, in his youth, was on a basketball team.
Okay.
And they were very, very good basketball players. And these were his dearest, dearest friends who he relied on to play basketball. He relied on to keep him New York solid rather than LA flaky. He loved these guys. They used to, when they were doing Family Ties, they would fly out to go to tapings. But here they are, we're filming in New York every week. His friends were there. And he was the captain of that group. He was the captain of the basketball squad. And then when he made millions and millions of dollars, he was their captain because he kept them all together. And that's somebody who you always wanted to please. And he knew sociologically how to be a leader. And he was our leader, much more so than Bill, because Bill was a new kid. Bill was in his late 20s. But Gary was a father figure. He when you heard his laugh, you sort of said, "Daddy likes me." And you heard his laugh. You wanted to please him. And I remember I did a play once where I played a vicious, horrible studio boss. I was a really villainous character. And that's the kind of stuff I like to do. I don't just like to do comedies. I like to do different stuff. Gary didn't like it that I was this guy. He wanted me as Paul Lassiter. He always wanted. And I was nominated for a Tony for this performance. Gary, and I was really good. Gary did not like me. He just didn't like me. Okay. So that's sort of the way he was. He was a very sweet, a sweet man, a little bit of blinders sometimes, but he knew what he wanted. He was a great, great man. Truly great man.
And Richard, I spoke to Barry Bostwick and I asked him about when obviously Michael J. Fox, when his condition became known, it began to deteriorate. And once he announced he left, obviously at that time then the show was moved to Los Angeles, and Alexander Chaplin then had his issues as well, family issues, and he couldn't take part in the show anymore. Were you a bit concerned at the time? Did you feel, well, that was the end when the news came that Michael J. Fox wasn't going to be there anymore? Do you feel that there was going to be any more seasons? And how was your initial reaction when you heard that Charlie Sheen was coming on board?
It's a really good question that I've, in funny ways, never really asked myself. We sort of, I mean, when Michael took ill, I believe we were told that it was Lyme disease, or that's what I thought it was.
Okay.
I saw certain things, had no idea. One thing, you could sit me at a typewriter, I wouldn't think Parkinson's at all. I remember him getting angry at certain things or mad at his body, as it turns out, that his body not being allowed to let him do things. I also thought when I saw him shake sometimes, he was a big smoker. And I thought, Jesus, get rid of the cigarettes. Look at you. You look terrible. You're shaking. Go get yourself a cigarette. I had no idea it was Parkinson's. When he left, and I'm going to tell you something. I'm a character actor. Yeah. Character actors have no power. Somebody powerful says, go over there and dance. A character actor dances. That's what we do. I'm a monkey on a string. We were told that Michael wasn't doing it anymore, but we're going to go to LA and do it with Charlie Sheen. Well, okay. Tell me where to stand. Tell me what to say. That's all it was. It didn't really hit me that Charlie Sheen was going to do it. It was just somebody else, and it's not Michael. Because of my love for Michael, I was sad. I was disappointed because I thought Michael was great. He was there's a reason why he's a star. You become a star because you're good looking, because you have a great persona, but you can also act. And if you get all of those components, you become a star. He was a shockingly great actor and smart. He's that he's now a hero. I mean, I had no idea about that. You know, who knew that he could be so heroic and give of himself and work so hard to do that? So I was sad not to be with him. Charlie Sheen, I didn't think he was the greatest actor in the world. I enjoyed lots and lots of his performances, or certainly his movies, but never an award-winning performance. Always great. And then I was shocked at how good he was. Okay. He proved to me that he was really great. I will tell you something else. I've talked about how Gary was a leader and a father figure. Charlie came to every rehearsal off book, was not doing drugs, was not screwing around like he eventually did. He was, when I tell you ramrod straight, he served his leader, and Gary was to him what, who was Mike Tyson's trainer? Is it Gustamato? Was that who it was?
Yeah.
Gary was to Charlie what Gustamato was to Mike Tyson. That's just what he was. And when they disappeared from his life, when Gus did and when Gary did, they fell off the rails. So we had no more Spin City. That was over. Charlie went and worked for Chuck Lorre, who was somebody who I know as a friend and have worked for. I get along with him great. He's had his issues with other people, not my business. But Charlie really had his issues with Chuck Lorre, and Chuck Lorre was the antithesis of Gary,
Okay.
Charlie. And that's when he fell off the rails. It was like he wanted to beat a class in humanity into Chuck Lorre. And that's not what Chuck Lorre does. Chuck Lorre's a writer. He wrote the scripts and everything like that. And he said, do this, and he's very controlling. Gary is humanely controlling. Chuck is demandingly controlling. And it got to Charlie, and Charlie fell apart. But Charlie was terrific. I will tell you this. When they started writing the scripts for Charlie and Heather, you're going to laugh at this, but this is how I viewed it. They got pressure from ABC, have some sort of a, what I call a Sam and Diane from Cheers type of a relationship. You're attracted to each other, but you don't get it. It's been done before because it was done on Cheers. But they wanted to duplicate it on the show. So it's beautiful Heather Locklear with bad boy Charlie Sheen, handsome, and I think she likes me. Oh, should we go out? I wanted to puke. I thought it was the worst thing because you have some woman who was married to Tommy Lee and I believe made a sex tape, along with a guy who was known for being with prostitutes and doing an inordinate amount of drugs. And they're acting so coy. Oh, should I kiss her? Oh, should we go out like that? I'm going, shut up. We're an adult show. We're not a show for teenagers. Let's serve who these people are. You can't discard their reputations just because you're putting them in a different role. Maybe you could do it in a movie, but not week after week. That's what TV is all about. You hook into who you think these people are, and you welcome them into your living room. I just thought it was dreadful, and that was very difficult for me. Okay. But the scripts were pretty great, and the acting still was, Heather and by the way, this does not discount the magnificence of Charlie and Heather's acting. It's the words that I had to see. And Charlie, I think, felt the same way. But like I said, Charlie went by the book. Gary said, you're doing this. And Charlie said, give me the pages. So he was really, really a great, great guy. I loved Charlie while we were working with him. I loved him. Thought he was wonderful. And I loved Heather. It was wonderful.
Richard, just on really one of those scenes, and probably one of your most iconic scenes in the show, people still talk about it, was the "Who Wants to Be a Millionaire" sort of scene.
Right. I'll tell you something. I was the first person to ever win $1 million. Paul Lassiter was the first person. The lights and the money coming down and the confetti had never been done on TV before. I was the first. How about that?
That's great. When you saw that on the scripts and when you saw that for your character, were you excited by the whole sort of prospect?
I got to admit, look, I'm an actor who likes to act, and Spin City used to frustrate me sometimes because I used to say, and I was grateful for the job and for the people that I got to work with, but I used to say, same joke, different words. But that is the nature of situation comedy. You establish a character and there aren't very many levels that you're allowed to do. This one gave me levels. This was, I got to stretch. I got to really use sort of acting muscles and be creative. So I enjoyed that. I did. I enjoyed it very much.
Richard, probably the penultimate question now I have for you. And let's say they were producing a Spin City encyclopedia, a sort of a dictionary as such, and they put your character Paul Lassiter into that encyclopedia, and they left 2 blank sentences under his name in terms of the synopsis. And the talent agent came on to you, Richard Kind, and asked you to write 2 sentences to sum up the person what Paul Lassiter was, what would you like those 2 sentences to read?
I wouldn't like them, but they would be press secretary, idiot.
Press secretary, idiot. And finally, Richard, from me to you, is there any sort of unique story to you that in particular from your time on Spin City for the last 30 seconds? Maybe an interaction with a character, maybe a scene off set or in between takes or something that still makes you laugh to this day, or sort of a funny sort of moment that people don't know about, or one sort of iconic sort of story that
all I can tell you is we could have gotten out of there in an hour and a half.
Okay.
Of rehearsal. We could have blocked everything. We were good. We were so good. But the amount of fun that we had working on this show, the women were, dare I say, salty.
Okay.
The banter that we had would get us arrested or thrown out of SAG today.
Okay.
A scene would take half an hour, 45 minutes, because we'd be telling stories or laughing or making jokes about where we had to move. I just did a reading not 2 hours ago.
Okay.
On Zoom of a screenplay. And the author's, one of his mentors was the guy who directed many of our episodes, a guy named Andy Cadiff.
Okay.
And I was telling the writer, just before we started reading the screenplay, I said, I had some questions and some demands. And Andy just goes, and this is 20 years later, Andy just goes, I'm getting PTSD from listening to you, because it brings back the memories of how demanding I was, of how loud I was, how obnoxious I could be, of how funny I could be, of the stories. It took us right back. And I, more than any other TV show, production, anything, I am still friends with Sandy. You call him Alexander Chaplin, I don't. With Sandy, with Barry, with Alan, with Michael Fox, and with Michael Boatman. I will still call and keep in touch with them and how they're doing and how their children are. They were glorious days. We may have each gone on to doing things that were more lucrative, dare I say, might have been more of a challenge and more fun as far as an actor, as far as quality of project that we're doing. For instance, Alan Ruck is now on Succession. As popular as Spin City was, Succession is gargantuan. Oh. But I hold those guys so dear in my life, and that is really what I cherish so much. I see them all. I see Mike all the time. I play golf with him. I help out with his charity events. He has a place in the Hamptons. I see him out there. We see each other.
On that great note, Richard Kind, an absolute pleasure for talking to you this evening, for taking part in our cult classic documentary series, reliving your moments on Spin City, playing the one and only Paul Lassiter. Richard, thanks for sharing all those memories, all those insights. It was a golden time back in the 90s for Spin City. It left its mark. You were one of the founding fathers of the show, still present, still making people laugh to this day. Richard Kind, we wish you all the best and a prosperous 2021. And no doubt we'll see you back on our screens doing what you do the best in the near future. Take care, Richard Kind.
You're very nice. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.